And hello there, whoever's out there. Welcome back on what is a strangely lovely, bright spring day in Pittsburgh. And all the snow has gone. Where are the snows of yesterweek? They are gone. It's very extraordinary to go from like -5 on average to +15. Or, that's centigrade because I still think that way, Celsius. Shame on me. Anyway, it went from very cold to very warm very quickly. And I'm just not used to that. I find it very unbecoming. I like gradual change. So have we anybody out there today? It's all very quiet. Ah, there's Shelley. Happy Friday to you. And welcome. First up today. And Marlene from Squirrel Hill. Purim, the topsy-turvy holiday. I love that. Yes, very good. Yes, I'll be announcing that later, but our gratitude to the Reverend James, who's sponsoring today's webinar. And anybody interested in sponsoring, just send us an email. We'll let you know how you can go about it. And because although we don't charge for the webinars, they're always free, it does cost us to actually present them. You have to pay for the service and what have you. James from Greensburg, hello there. I presume hello Dennis. I presume that the snow has all gone in Greensburg as well. Yes, Rebecca. I hope you prefer seeing me than the sun, but it's nice that you put me in similar terms. Thank you. I like seeing the sunshine. I don't like too much heat, but I do like sunshine. We all need it. Vitamin D deprivation. There it is. That's how you sponsor. Send us an email at marketing@pigtheatre.org and we'll get back to you immediately. And yes, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll get all our alerts and you'll be able to see webinars. They're all eventually getting up there. It's taken us a little bit of time, but we hope certainly by next month, every webinar we have will be on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to watch them all. David, welcome. And thank you for thanking the Reverend. Yes, no snow in Greensburg. Isn't that good? Hello, Debbie. Hey, Aoife. Hello there. No snow in Dublin either, as far as I know. Probably rain. Hello, Blythe. Yes, I would advise you not driving on the lake in North Park. I think it's a very good choice. Michelle, hello, welcome. Grace, good to see you. Welcome back. One of our loyalists and most regulars. And there's FitzJamie1 back again, leaping. I don't believe that's Jim Fitzgerald leaping. I bet it's Fred Astaire. But anyway, yes, do send in your questions as we are talking. We may not pick them up as we're talking, but I try to pick them up at the end of the webinar. And as I say, if you've got any questions that we don't pick up or that are slightly more complex or longer, just send us an email or put it up on the chat line, and we will get back to you with a response. Hello, Yoke, welcome. Here you are again, and James. Yes, it was an interesting. Yes, you watched the movie of Waiting for Godot. Yes, very interesting. As I say, we made that movie a long time ago, and we didn't like it, but we've been on stage doing it at that stage for 16 years on and off. So we much preferred the stage version, but everybody seems to like the movie version. And as I say, I think that certainly some of the performances in it, modesty forbids, but I think they're amazing. And it's one of the high points, I suppose, of my acting career was being in that production for so long. There was another play I did, different author, an Oscar Wilde, not Lady Bracknell. There was the other high point, but I've talked about that before. That was in Salome. I didn't play Salome, I played Herod. But yes, that movie is well worth watching as a very clear and very amusing and very, very precise interpretation and presentation of Waiting for Godot, the one in Beckett on film from the gate. And if you haven't watched it, I recommend that you watch it. And actually, there was a sad loss in the theatre profession the other day. Ronald Pickup died, and he was an amazing English actor. I saw him when I was but a youth. When I was a theatre student, he worked at the National Theatre under Laurence Olivier, and they did an all-male version of As You Like It. He played one of the best Rosalinds I've ever seen. He was extraordinary. And the production of Waiting for Godot that Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen did, he played Lucky in that as well certainly on one occasion. I know he played it. They did it a few times. But another sad loss to the profession. Ronald Pickup, beautiful actor. We seem to be losing them this year. It's always sad, but when you have an illustrious career like his behind you, you had a good innings. Hello, Ken. Welcome. And thank you for saying hello. Thank you for struggling to find out how to say hello. It's worth the struggle. I always say, life is but a struggle, and life on webinars is an even bigger struggle, but it's worth the effort. Thank you, Ken. Hello, Kay. Here you are. And Joanne. Saw the play in Oakland years ago. Which one? Waiting for Godot, I presume you're referring to. Was it the one we did? Hello, Barbara in Mount Lebanon. We did do it a few years back. Little cross conversation going on there between Dennis and Ken. Always nice that you chat with one another. We are one big happy family. So I think it is now nearly 2:05, and I think anybody who comes later than this deserves to miss the beginning. So first of all, welcome again. Welcome. We're going to be continuing our conversation on Samuel Beckett, and last week we looked at Waiting for Godot. This week we're looking at Endgame, but we're looking at the fun and games. And really it arose from that proposition that you often hear that Beckett is heavy and tedious and depressing and boring, whereas in fact he is light and frothy and top full of fun, in that his plays, which are so fundamental, so existential, they are so much not merely about life, they are actual representation, they are life itself. And life in itself is always a tragicomedy. Life is happy and sad at one and the same time. And in this particular play, Endgame, very much of that proposition is exemplified just by looking at the text. You can't read it without smiling. I'm going to bring back my guest from last week, Hazel Leroy. Welcome back.
Hello.
Good for you to join us. Lovely to see you. You're looking splendid, may I say.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank Jeffrey Smith, who cuts my hair. And whenever he cuts my hair, he makes it straight because he likes a challenge.
Because you do have a tendency, shall we say, to be frothy and girly.
Frizzy.
I need a haircut. I managed to push it all back today, but I really got to get a haircut. Anyway, let's talk about Endgame. I said that this was, if Godot was his masterpiece, this comes a very, very close second. Many people would argue it's actually a greater play and a better play. I don't know whether it is. I've done both of them as an actor. and I've done both of them as a director, and I wouldn't know which way to call that. But it is an extraordinary piece, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. And earlier in the week, I was telling Alan that it was cold and it was gray and it was drizzling, and there were things going on at work. And I picked up my the text again, because you have to go back to the play itself. You can't read commentary about it. Just go to it. And at the beginning of the week, it was very, very dark, this play. And then the sun came out, and I went outside, and today I walked 2 miles, and and today it's a much, much more fun play. So there you have it.
I think it's a very interesting observation, in the fact that a play that, again, has no plot particularly, that is about an aspect of living, as Godot is, can be completely affected as you read it by the mood that you're bringing to it. It's what you bring to it that sort of affects the way you interpret it, the way you read it, what the lines themselves offer you. For those who don't know the play, it's set in a somewhat ambiguous room that has one door, 2 windows, 2 trash cans, and a man in a wheelchair and a man who isn't. And that's it. I think that pretty much sums it up.
And you should note that the windows are high up in the wall.
Very high up in the wall. So in order to
the idea that the room is a basement room.
Yeah, you get the impression. But again, Beckett, in his divine way, never actually explains anything. Explanation, what you see is what you get. It is exactly what you see. It is a room. And rather like Godot, a country road, a rock, a tree. Where it is, when it is, how it is, what it is entirely up to you to work it out. You create that country road. And in this sense, the same is true again, isn't it? We are in an enclosed space with only 2 possible ways of seeing out, and both of them are almost inaccessible, except for a stepladder. There is a door which we believe goes to a kitchen, but we are never told. We never see it.
Yeah.
There are 2.
The kitchen has equal dimensions. It's a square.
Yeah. And you've got the 2 trash cans, one of which contains Nag, and the other of which contains Nell, who have both lost their legs and live inside these trash cans, because we tend... Now, all of these are symbolic in a sense. They are the parents of Ham, the, if you like, hero of the piece. And you could argue that is representative of the fact that we tend to trash the older generation. It's a somewhat unsubtle way of looking at it, but it is an actuality. Anyway, that's the setup. But again, and before we get into conversation, rather like Godot, where he sort of lays out what to expect in the very first lines of the play, nothing to be done, I'm beginning to come around to that opinion. With Endgame, he does a very similar thing, and the character of Clove, who is the servant character, if you like, and I don't want to be specific about that, begins the play with the lines, finished, it's finished, nearly finished, it must be nearly finished. And that sets up a fascinating proposition, because the play is called Endgame, not the end, but the game of ending. I want to ask you, the follow-on line to that is one that I've always been fascinated with, and it comes from a Greek philosopher, the name of which I can never remember, the name of whom I can never remember. But he talks about, where he talks about, it must be nearly finished, grain upon grain, one by one, and one day suddenly there's a heap, a little heap, the impossible heap. The philosophical concept was that a heap of millet is impossible. How many grains of millet make a heap?
And I cannot remember the name of the philosopher either, and it will probably drive me crazy.
Yes, it's driving me. It's annoying me now because
I knew it at the beginning of the week. Somebody Wikipedia that.
Yes, somebody should Wikipedia it immediately and put it in the chat.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Make us feel better.
The whole concept of the heap, the impossibility of the heap of millet, is the perfect definition of this play. It is because it is how long is a life, and when is it complete? That there is, just as there is no solution to the heap, there is no end, only the process of ending. You can keep adding grains of millet, but you never come to a conclusion. And that to me is sort of the skeleton upon which the play hangs and the relationship between them.
There are times in Endgame that I believe that ham and clove are one entity at different times. And I wanted to know if you ever, when you were playing the role, did you ever, with your counterpart, did you ever think, clove is me, is ham, an earlier iteration?
It's an interesting question. The answer is not particularly. I played it, I think, as I told you, on and off for about 16 years with Barry McGovern as Clove, who was Vladimir in Waiting for Godot. And the fact that one of the advantages, again, it's company theatre and the joys of it, the fact that Barry and I had been working together for, a generation and knew one another as actors incredibly closely, we found a way or a manner of using the dialogue in the way that two long-term friends, intimates, would talk to one another. These two talk rather like Gogo and Dee Dee. These two talk almost like man and wife. Almost, they are inextricably linked to one another. It's not, I suppose, to answer your question, not so much that Clove is an earlier iteration of ham, but that Clove and ham have become almost totally mutually dependent. They cannot exist without each other.
But I also, there's a whole generational thing going on with Endgame, that one could construct this little family, that Nag and Nell are Ham's progenitors, that Ham has taken on Clove, has adopted Clove as a son, one can understand it that way, and it makes sense that way, and it's supported that way in the text. But there's a line at one point when Clove says to Ham, I'll stop feeding you, and Ham says, then we will cease to exist. We will die. Yeah. We will die, not I.
Yes, I know the point, because it's one of those arresting moments in the script when the actors turn to the director and say, "What's he mean there?" Mm-hmm. Then we will die. Now, is he referring to himself and Naganel, or is he referring to the whole process will come to an end? I like to think that he's referring to the whole process ceasing, because if you take away one of the pegs that hold it together, it all falls apart.
If you look at it as this, what you're seeing on the stage is an organism, right? You can see the symbiosis going on. That it's hard to tell which is the host exactly. Perhaps just the space, but that there's an interdependent web going on here, and that each of them gives something to others and depends on the others.
Isn't that the principle of playing a game? That it's like kids playing cops and robbers, and one kid goes bang, you're dead, and if the other kid doesn't drop down, then the game has broken. A game only works. Any game only works if you abide. I mean, a game of football only works if you abide by the set of rules. A game of hockey, a game of baseball, a game of cricket, any sport, any game only plays if the rules are clearly defined. And if you take a rule away, then we'll die.
Yeah.
It comes to an end. And the object of what we're doing is playing a game of ending, not coming to the end. We must keep playing the game, and you've got to follow the rules within that. Which leads me, I suppose, to the fact that they are playing games all the time. They play word games.
Yes.
I like it. Yes. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I said sometimes you listen to the dialogue and it's Abbott and Costello.
Well, and it just and the get out your scientific dictionary, boys and girls, because a heliometer, an anemometer, hygrometer.
Yeah, hygrometer.
Hygrometer it's the humidity, which is 0. The wind speed is at 100, and the space between the stars. That's what heliometer does.
Yes.
That's 50. And it just, it's interesting to me that that Beckett likes to put these things in, little bits of knowledge that you pick up along the way, that you may have remembered from junior high school, general science class or something. And he puts them in, and then people write dissertations about what that means. And I have to think that if there's an after something, an afterlife, something that he would be sitting there sniggering to himself about all of the different interpretations that we come up with, because oh my, can you come up with different interpretations? And you said earlier to me that you thought that Nell and Nag in the garbage cans. Yes, it can be a metaphor for the way that we treat our elderly. And the older I get, I can see that, and I can also see me as Ham looking at people who are maybe a little bit older and being totally disgusted by them. This is for Ken Bolden. I was in the Giant Eagle again today, Ken. And, they stand in the middle of the aisles, and they, there I am, I'm judging them. whereas someone younger than I may be saying, what is that stupid old lady doing? Right. So, but you said earlier that you thought that, that Nell was frivolous. And I said, no, she's not frivolous. She's ethereal.
Yeah, which is a much better word.
Whereas Nag is very much in his body, very corporeal.
Yes, very corporeal. Yeah.
Scratch my back. I cannot reach that far. And she goes back into her memories of the wonderful time when they were on Lake Como, and she could see.
In that sense, Beckett is, again, he's produced a perfect encapsulation of old age, one of which is crotchety, self-centered, self-seeking,
physical.
Give me a biscuit. Give me this little story. I want me pap. All of that, and then with Nell, you get the other side of that, which is memory, and that the memory is delicate and beautiful. I mean, the two words, yesterday, sum up everything about that aspect of growing old.
And he says, you laughed at my joke. She said, no, I laughed because I was happy.
Yeah.
You're wrong. It wasn't your silly, dirty joke or racy joke. Not even racy. It's a pretty funny joke.
It is a pretty funny joke, actually. But again, like a joke that you've heard many times, it's still funny, but you just don't laugh as much anymore. And that's also life. Everything about this play comes back to the fact that it is representative of the process. Now, if we work on that principle that, as I said last week, the Beckettian principle of you're born, you do stuff, you die. And what you do while waiting to die is the stuff that we call life. The process of ending is somewhat similar. It's going to end. The end is coming. What do you do while waiting for the end? How do you go through that process of the ending? Which, and part of it is playing the similar games to the games that you see in Godot, the word games, the fun games, and also the processes of life. Like, is it time for my painkiller? No. Go and get 2 bicycle wheels. There's no more bicycle wheels.
I'd like to pee.
I'd like to pee.
I'll get the catheter.
Yeah, I love that.
Which is
my favorite reference on that one is when Clove asks a little later, "What about that pee?" And Ham says, "I'm having it."
I'm having it, and with such joy.
It's such joy that he's sitting in his chair peeing. And that he still can, which is also a joy. That he still can tell stories. That he can still command. Which is also a life-affirming thing for a Ham character, for that. I remember the director that we had for our never-ending production, Antoni Libera, who was from Poland. He was Beckett's translator into Polish and Russian and worked very closely with Beckett. Beckett always described him as my ambassador beyond the Iron Curtain back in the day. And I remember him telling us that part of the logic behind the naming of the characters was the hammer. And just to come back to your point about how closely associated are the two characters, that he said that the ham aspect of the hammer was the thumpy side, and that the other side, one hit, the other pulled. And that was the claw or the clove. And by the way, if anybody's wondering, if you are reading the play, it is pronounced clove, not clove, and the town of Cove, not Cov, is mentioned in the script. Beckett was very particular about that.
Well, I had the graduate seminar that I told you about before, where one of the members of the seminar insisted that it was a ham studded with cloves. That's where it came from. And I said, no, I don't think so.
No.
But that stuck with me for
Basically, but not necessarily true.
it's an interesting image. I wanted to ask you about all of the references in this play, and they are there. You know, I want to discount them to the fact that outside of this shelter, or in some translations, I guess it's refuge, but it's shelter in mine, Grove Press.
Yeah, Grove Press has shelter. The British and the Irish will use the refuge.
This one was $2.95 because there's last week my Grove Press.
I know that when I'm playing the part, I use the word refuge, so that was where my script had.
But in the Grove Press, which is primarily, I suppose, for the American audience, it's shelter. And you know, they're in a basement, and the descriptions that Clove gives to Ham about what's going on, and the little asides that Clove makes about, you know, the lighthouse has disappeared. He's wrong, but you know, there seems to be and at one point he says there is no more nature. There is no more nature. There is no more pain medication. There is no more PAP. Here's a biscuit. This is all we've got. That there's some sort of wasting going on. And I don't know whether earlier in the week that I got this in my head so much because of this past year and being stuck inside. But, you know, I got the idea that something catastrophic has happened outside of this shelter, this refuge, and that they're sheltering, they're protected somehow from what's going on.
Well, you know, again, countless dissertations have been written on the fact that when he wrote this, the world was not that far away from the only use of an atomic bomb or two atomic bombs, and also the Cold War was at its height. So the notion of a nuclear apocalypse was very much on people's mind. So the immediate and perfectly reasonable interpretation is that what we are looking at is people trapped in a cellar, post-apocalyptic nuclear warfare. Perfectly reasonable, but far too specific. Because I think, you know, you can take it as a premise. If you need a kind of a logic in your mind to say, well, why are they there? A, you're not reading Beckett properly, and B, if it helps, it helps. Whatever.
I mean, that's, you know, why I asked you about whether or not Clove was Ham's.
My point is that I think we are dealing with dying or ending.
Ending.
And it is Ham who is ending. Now, in the process, there are three other people in this play, two of them in trash cans, or dustbins, as they say in the UK, and one living in his kitchen. Ham cannot walk and is blind. Clove, so he's sitting in a wheelchair all the time, and it's not even a proper wheelchair, it's a chair with wheels on it. Clove cannot sit down, so all he can do is stand up and walk, but he can see. So you've got all these restrictions, all these reductions in the state of humanity, of being human. The two in the trash cans have no legs, so they can't even move. They can't walk. They live inside their respective trash cans, separate bedrooms. And they're in a room which is undefined. When you say it's a basement, who knows?
It's lower, anyway.
Nobody knows. It is a room. The windows are so high up you cannot see out of them without going up a stepladder. Ham cannot see outside. His only information about outside is what is provided by Clove, who can look out of the windows.
I want to talk about those windows for a moment, because some of the funniest thing to me at the beginning of this, I mean, it just sets it up as, funny to me, is that Clove has to go retrieve the stepladder. He brings it to one of the windows, looks out, then gets down, crosses to the other window, and remembers that he's forgotten the stepladder. Has to go back and get the stepladder. And this whole routine, how many times have you gone into a room, and I don't care how old you are, because it happens to all of us. If we're tired, if we're out of sorts, if we're thinking about something else, but how many times do human beings, they're doing a task and they forget one little element of it and have to go back and regroup,
But is this not, I mean, it's derivative, yes, because this is Laurel and Hardy. This is Buster Keaton. This is Harold Lloyd. This is any of those great silent movie stars. But why did Beckett didn't so much steal it as adapted it? But why is it funny? It's funny because it's what we do.
It's what we do.
Because it is absolutely the human condition. And the more isolated you become, and I think people over the last year may have discovered this in themselves, that the more isolated and alone you become, the more absurd your behavior begins to be. And the more you start developing I did it this morning. I couldn't find my wallet. And I searched everywhere. I up and down through the house. Places in the house I wouldn't have taken my wallet. Because eventually I found it about 6 inches away from where I thought I'd put it. But we become utterly absurd in our behaviors, which is another thing. In the game, as you come to the point of end, I want to talk about that in a second in relation to the speed of light. But as you come to the point of end, it stretches and things become more absurd. And as you say, Clove and the whole issue of the stepladder, which repeats itself throughout the play, is this glorious absurdity of how we behave stupidly, the more isolated we become, where you've established a kind of a ritual of behavior, and then suddenly that ritual begins to break down because you can't quite remember it, or you've done it so many times that you forget bits of it. And Clove forgetting to move the stepladder with him, of having to go back for it, is a perfect example of that.
You wanted to talk about the speed of light?
Well, yes, in a way.
I'm game. Go on.
Throughout the play, you have this constant interchange between the two of them that slowly reveals a kind of table of authorities. Ham is the boss, but Ham is a boss totally dependent upon the servant. So technically the servant is the boss, because without the servant, the boss cannot function. Ham sneers constantly at the servant. The master and servant relationship is very clearly defined in Ham's attitude to Clove. Clove is totally subservient and willing to be so because it gives him functionality. In other words, we like being bullied because that way we don't have to think for ourselves.
And it defines what we do. I mean,
and it defines what we do. I think Clove has something to do. Did you ever think never? It's that the Clove does not want to function independently, but he would like to escape. He would like it to end. But his notion of ending is walking out of here and disappearing into a trail of dust. That he will simply, and that's another interesting one, because once the glue, as it were, of the social structure within the room disappears, you're nothing. That if your function is to serve and the need to serve disappears, you have you cease to function, you cease to exist. Ham, on the other hand, wants to end but can't. And he has this remarkable speech. I'll try and find it. We used to call it Ham's soliloquy for some reason or another, because it's not. He's been telling this story. He describes it as his journal. And he's got this story about a man coming and looking for food, and the man bringing his boy and him taking him on as a servant and then adopting the boy, which may be Clove and may not be. Maybe Clove is the man, not the son, maybe the child. We don't know. It's absolutely undefined. There's always the impression that Ham is the elder and Clove is the younger. The last time I directed it, I actually cast them with Clove slightly older than Ham. It worked brilliantly. I mean, I had David Bradley, the British actor, as Clove. But it suddenly, the relevance of age ceased to matter. Mm-hmm. What matters is the nature of the characters. But anyway, Ham is trying to find an ending to his story. He wants his story to end. And he can't. He can't find an end. And he talks about his own ending in a similar way. I'm trying to find the moment. When he says, maybe when the end comes, I can't find the reference quickly, that he will be able to throw himself out of his chair and crawl along the ground with his nails until he can go no further. And it's this wonderful description of that process of winding down to an end. Mm-hmm. There I'll be, alone in the silence and the stillness. And that is a beautiful notion, that as you end, as death comes, as the finality of death comes, it is silence and stillness. And then Beckett takes it that one step further, that you hear the scratching of a rat, you can't, there's noises in your ears, you can't. And what I think he is describing here is the fact that ending is an impossibility. He was not a religious person in that sense, but the notion that there is no end, there is no point of completion. There is life, and life is not dependent upon consciousness, because life is the activity of down to an atomic particle structure. There is no stillness. When your heart stops, your brain's still active. When your brain is dead, your atoms are still active, and they're now decomposing to recompose in another form. Death. In other words, it is impossible to achieve the magical heap of millet grains. There is no point at which it is complete. It continues. So I think what Beckett is talking about there is that ending is a game. And the game has rules, but it doesn't have completion. There's no final score.
What is it that they call in music the da capo ending?
Yeah.
This seems to me to be very much like that. At one point, close to the end, Ham even says, "The end is in the beginning, and yet you go on." And, there's so many times when you think that this is coming to a conclusion, and it just doesn't. And
at the end of the play, sorry, let me just complete that speed of light thought. And it is rather like trying to achieve the speed of light. You can get closer to it and closer to it and closer to it and closer to it, but you can never, ever reach it. Because if you do, you don't exist. What was the thing about, Achilles and the tortoise or something? That if Achilles sets off and covers half the distance the tortoise has, with, he can never actually beat the tortoise. He can never catch up because each time he's only covering half the distance that the tortoise achieved. You can never reach the end. There is no end point, only the process of ending.
And even though Clove has put on his hat, has his bag, he enters and stays there, stands there impassive and motionless, his eyes fixed on Ham till the end.
Yeah. Ham just covers himself up exactly as he was at the beginning, with the same.
Clove is still there.
And interestingly enough, people sort of say, well, there's Nag and Nell, they're dead. No, they're not. We don't know.
We don't know. It's not certain.
Because it's Schrodinger's cat. When Clove looks into Nell's trash can and Ham says, is she dead? He says, looks like it. And into Nag's, is he dead? Doesn't look like. So there is nothing finite. Now let's go back to your windows.
What do you mean? What
is he looking at? And I would argue that if you take it as a post-apocalyptic planet laid waste by nuclear fallout, it's too easy an answer.
It's much too easy an answer. And also, when he thinks that the lighthouse has disappeared, it's because he's looking out the wrong window.
Yeah.
So
So what I'm saying is that what is outside those windows? Expectation of despair or expectation of possibility. We don't know. What is outside that window is memory. What is outside that window is hope. Hope, for instance, that can be that can be fulfilled or can be dashed completely. But outside one window is the earth. Outside the other window is the ocean. What's the ocean doing? Nothing. That's because there's no more navigators. It is only humanity that makes the ocean active. Without humanity, there is nothing going on. Mm-hmm. So the belief that beyond their existence, which is defined by a wall, mm-hmm. there is nothing, because anything beyond that wall is not part of their existence.
If it's not there in that space, then it isn't really there.
Yeah, but that's very much a human condition, in the sense that we all live in a village. Everybody on this planet lives in a village. We don't live in cities. Cities are an imaginary thing. We live in a village, and the village that you and I live in, Pittsburgh, is very different to the village that a gynecologist or a computer scientist or a bricklayer, we all live in different villages. I can guarantee that you are a theatre practitioner in Pittsburgh. I'm a theatre practitioner in Pittsburgh. I know in Dublin, people say, isn't Dublin wonderful? I say, well, my bits were. We all live in a village. We all live in a confined space. Outside that confined space is a world we imagine, but cannot be certain of.
We're not, yeah.
We're not part of it. So it's a world of hope, or despair, or dismay. It's a world of cruelty. It's a world of kindness. Whatever we imagine it to be, but we're not in it. We don't see it. We only live in that precise world that is within our walls.
I was actually saying to my son, we were having a conversation, and he was supposing this and supposing that. What if I had, and I said, well, wherever you go, there you are, and he looked at me and sneered, but granted that I was, that it was true. It's where you are, where you're situated. You're very right.
Yeah. And within that specific, and that, I mean, I found this not by reading various tracts and dissertations, but just by doing it, because I will confess, although I'd read a fair bit about Godot before I ever did it, I read nothing about Endgame before I walked into that first rehearsal. except the script. And it was very, very amusing, actually, because we had a 5-week rehearsal period. And for the first 2 weeks, Barry and I were never in the rehearsal room at the same time because we were both working on a movie. And he was in different scenes to mine. So we rehearsed separately for a while. But it was trying to find that definition. And you find it is the text that tells you. It is the game they play together. And it's very Irish sometimes. Sometimes, again, the Hiberno English humor that I talked about last week with Godot is very much there within this play as well. I mean, there is the little lovely moment when Ham turns to Clove and says, "You're a bit of all right," and he replies, "A smithereen." I mean, it is pure Irish. It's so Irish. But again, that game interplay. There's an old, and there's so many examples of this, but there's the old classic Irish joke of the Kerry builder turning to his friend and saying, "Have you the shovel?" "I have." "Where have you it?" "I have it lost." And that's constantly repeated throughout this play. That same setup and gag throughout the play. It is that relationship between the two of them that is pure fun all the time.
Ham keeps saying "me to play" or "my turn." I would say, and instead of "me to play."
Because Ham wants always to be the boss. He wants always to take the lead.
He wants always for it to be his turn.
Yeah, it's almost at the very beginning when he takes off the
handkerchief.
The handkerchief, "me to play." It's almost like he's annoyed with the fact that Clove got there ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's his righteous place.
Can I tell you my favorite line?
Go on.
"If I don't kill that rat, he'll die."
Yeah, I think it's my favorite line too.
The rat's existence is somehow my responsibility. I'm making that rat happen, and I must kill him or he'll die. I could go, think about that forever, and it's silly, and I just love it. So,
but there's another reason. I mean, you can get so heavy, and I'm desperately trying to avoid getting too esoteric about these things in this play, because the dialogue. And I mean, short of reading you all the dialogue, I'm talking to the audience now. Read the play, just for the words. Just read the words, and don't try to work out where it is, what it is. Read it for the words, because the joy of humor is riddled through the play. Simple gags all the time. Nag and Nell talking to one another. Two old people. The beautiful conversation of two old people. "I've lost me tooth." "When?" "I had it yesterday." Yesterday."
Yesterday.
"Can you see me?" "Hardly." "And you?"
Can you hear me?
What?
It's
the conversations in that. You see, this is the point. That no matter, I think what Beckett wants us to feel and believe is that no matter how hard we try to despair, we are amused. No matter how much we try to be amused, we will despair. And that's in Godot as well. One of the thieves was saved, which is a good thing. Two of them died.
That's
not a good thing. No matter what way you look at things, you will perpetually be amused by your own stupidity, by your own futility. And that it is a kind of cosmic joke. That ending is impossible. When we look at the end of the play, as you say, with Clove standing there, looking as though he's about to leave, but not moving. The question must be asked, well, if we come back again, will Clove be saying, finished, it's finished?
Finished. It's finished.
Must be really finished.
Is it going to start all over again? The Da Capo ending. I go back to Nell. She is sweet, and she is sad, and she's exquisite in a way. When she talks about, yes, it's the most comical thing in the world, and we laugh with a will in the beginning, but it's always the same thing. Yes, it's like the funny story we've heard too often. We still find it funny, but we don't laugh anymore.
I like she is an exquisite in a way, isn't she? She is the memory, as I said, she is the Proustian memory of things past. And to her, it was better.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't recover it, and B, the only way for her to survive is to dwell in it, to reject the now and think back to when we were young and vibrant, and which we do constantly. And that's why we are sort of, in a way, denying the end, refusing to come to it. The game being played there is a game of denial.
Mm-hmm.
And to live in the past is a way of surviving the present and the unforeseen future. In the time we've got left, we did talk about King Lear. Which you and I have both played.
That was because of my students. My students asked me to do things on when the beginning of the summer, the pandemic, they were doing all sorts of Zoom productions. I don't know if anything became of it, but it's Alan's favorite play. If you didn't know that already, let me just tell you that it, and it's and in a sense, he said to me before this started that there is a lot of Lear in Ham. There is a lot of Lear in those characters that are supposed to be in charge, and are perhaps losing their grip on that. And so why don't you talk about that, Alan?
Well, I just wanted to bring it up because one of my heroes of commentary is the remarkable Jan Kott, and in his wonderful book Shakespeare Our Contemporary, he has a chapter called King Lear or Endgame. He actually uses more allusions to Godot in it than in that chapter, but the point he's making is that Lear, in a sense, is playing out an end game and going through a process so that when the end comes, he is ready. That everything that can possibly happen has happened, and he has got to the point of conclusion. So that I always say that rather, and it's rather true of Endgame, we don't know whether Ham dies. We don't know whether Nag and Nell are dead. But we know that the process of ending has reached that particular point. With Lear has a death moment that is not falling over crump. He literally stops. The best example I can give, and it's pure Beckett, is Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. Time to Die. And that's it. that you do, that the end point comes. And it happens for Lear. And it is on a similar trajectory that Ham is demonstrating. Authority, bombastic, losing control, losing the thread, losing the commentary, realizing his own vulnerability and inadequacy, that he cannot bring himself to conclusion. So there is a great parallel there. That was the only point I wanted to make. And
Well,
also Rutger Hauer moment in.
and, yeah, because that is one of the, that is. Oh,
That-
all right. So we're
that-
supposed to ask questions.
Oh, yes. Have we got any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-oh.
I think they're about to materialize.
Uh-oh. Here she goes.
Here she goes.
She's going to put them at the bottom of the screen.
Yes. Nag, Nell, all versions of Nail work with hammer. Yes. That was the other, you're quite right. That was the other point that Antoni made to us, that Nail and Nag and Nell work for the nail illusion, so that you've got the hammer, you've got the clove, the claw, and you've got the nails being, shall we say, suppressed by them.
Driven or being pulled out.
Yeah, the windows may be the eyes, and I think that's a very good allusion, in the sense that what we see is not necessarily what is there. We see sometimes what we wish to see, and Clove is a very inadequate interpreter of what he sees.
And well, and also too, that what is being described is barren, is nothing, is something that Ham would, being blind,
Yeah.
could perceive. Going to sleep each night?
Maybe a small end into dream world. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote about the end of day, finish, every day, be done with it, live in the now. Yeah, that notion of, which is also one of the hard things to do, finishing, wiping it out. Let's wipe it out and call it a day, is a wonderful notion, and one of the hardest things for the human being to achieve. If we could all finish each day and say, that's it, finished, but it goes on. Nearly finished. It's only ever nearly finished.
There is help me with anthropological stuff that I took in religious studies courses that I can't remember anymore. But isn't there that to sleep is often seen as a little death?
Yes.
And that when you go into dream time, then that's when you can talk with the ancestors. And
yeah, that's one theory. Mine is that you're just sorting out the filing cabinet of the day in your brain.
Right.
But
right.
James, yes, Beckett's Irish heritage did have influence on his plays. I think I mentioned last week, very much in terms of the use of what we might describe as Hiberno English, the way he phrased things, the way he, the kind of the patter, the nature of conversations. And if you look at some of the conversations in an infinitely more verbose writer who was a hero for Beckett, which was James Joyce, go and look at the conversations that take place in certain sections of Ulysses, and you will see a very similar rhythmic construct. So yeah, his Irish and particularly his Anglo-Irish heritage did have a huge influence on him.
Old stauncher.
Old stauncher, yeah.
Which is wonderful.
It's the Endgame involved. Yes, I think. Well, we use the term Endgame. The Endgame, the final portion of the game of chess, which is that you have a beginning, a middle, and an end game.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning, you're setting up your pieces. In the middle, you're carrying out a war. But in the final moments, you are attempting to achieve a point of dominance. And remember, at the end of a game of chess, is before the final move is taken.
That's yes. It's the actual the play
It's
that's
the play.
happening. Just like
Play to the point when the king is in checkmate. But you
just
don't
like
take the king.
openers, in chess are
Yeah.
openers.
On that point, that in the end game of a game of chess, you never come to the end because the final move is never taken. You don't take the king. The king is just is unnecessary or not taken. The game has not reached its end. Only the proposition of the end. It's an interesting point. I'm confusing myself now. Deeply, and even an email to you wouldn't answer that question brilliantly, but I would recommend James Knowlson's brilliant biography of his life, and particularly his childhood. He was a very bright young child, and it did affect him. It did have an effect upon him. Working with James Joyce, moving to Paris had an infinitely deeper effect on him. It was a fascinating life. I'm not even going to try to answer that question other than to say Jim Knowlson's book is amazing. It's terrific. Big read. I have it.
It's a big read.
Yeah, well, Benjamin Franklin did some very strange things in his life, including flying kites in the middle of a thunderstorm. But it just goes to show Benjamin Franklin wasn't entirely a gentleman.
Well, no. And there were the ladies, weren't there?
Yes. Oh, there were lots of the ladies, yes.
Many, many ladies. Many frothy young ladies.
Anyway, listen. Any other questions that we pick up, we will try to get back to you. But if you want opinions, genuinely, if you've never read it and you want to know about Beckett's life, I heartily recommend the book by James Knowlson, the title of which is, as usual, gone out of my head. I'm trying to see if it's nearby me. It's not. What is it? Yes, it is. This is it. Yeah, there we go.
It's right there. I was going to say, isn't it right there, Alan?
Right there. Damned to Fame. It is a wonderful biography of Beckett. It's by James Knowlson. It was published some years ago. Mine is autographed by the author because myself and Barry McGovern were actually we did the launch of this book at the Royal Court Theatre in London, and it's long, it's detailed, but it's very readable, and I think it's the best account of his life. James Knowlson, I don't know if he's still doing I don't know what became of him. He was a lecturer in English at University of Reading in the UK. But that's the book I would go to. As I say, there are certain biographies I recommend. If it's Oscar Wilde, it's the Ellman biography, which is by far the best. But for Beckett, Jim Knowlson, definitely that's the one to go for. Hazel, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a delight and a pleasure, and I love the hair. And we'll have you back again discussing other topics at some point in the future. But in the meantime, thank you for being there.
Thank you.
And as for everybody else, next week, I'm going to do a session on, how would I describe it? How do you conceptualize what the stage should look like when you do a play? In other words, design. I want to look at an actor once, when I was directing a play once a long time back, and an actor trying to understand in rehearsal, he said, "Oh, I get it. I see it. You paint pictures, don't you?" And I said, "That's exactly it. That's what the function, I think, of the director is to paint the pictures on the stage. And to do that, one needs design concepts." So what I want to talk about next week, just as an introductory session, I'm going to talk to a couple of designers later on. But next week, I want to just look at this whole idea of conceptualizing the picture. So that's what next week's going to be about. It's just going to be me. And so I do hope you join us. As I say, thank you for being there. Please, if you have any spare cash, just think about sticking it in an envelope or sending us an email or pushing the button. Every donation does help. We really, really do need those because, as you well know, we haven't had box office for quite some time. So every donation helps. You can go to the website. You can click on the donate. If you'd like to sponsor one of these, and I want to thank James again for sponsoring today's. It's most generous of you. But just get on to marketing@pigtheatre.org. You can see it there on the screen, and we'll send you an email, tell you how you can go about sponsoring these. If you have any particular topics you'd like us to cover over the next while, always make those suggestions. And if you have any big questions, we will try to get you an email as quickly as we can with a response. In the meantime, thank you for being with us. See you all next week. And of course, as usual, wash your hands, wear your mask, get a jab if you can, and take good care of yourselves. Bye now.